Excellent. So we may have promised at the start of this episode that we were going to do a little interview on the show, and as you would have it, it has come to fruition.
I may have joked that it might not have. That our guests may have had, a sense check at the last minute. This might seem like a bad idea. I've listened to some of the previous episodes, and this doesn't sound like something I'm going to be spending our first night doing. So.
But he's here. Against his better judgment, he is here. We've spoken about him on many a review, and we've been kind of speaking to various producers and engineers over the last little while on our podcast. So it seemed like we should definitely catch up with one of the biggest UK producers going at the moment. Lewis Johns joined us on the show. Welcome to the show, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. What an intro. Bloody hell.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
I do that for everybody. I do that for everybody.
Okay, good.
Just taking that lovely compliment and just diminished it completely.
Just for that.
One of the best. I tell everyone they're the best. Everyone.
Yeah, Brad and Jacob. Yeah, I give them all the compliments. All the compliments. So thanks for taking the time to join us on the podcast. Much appreciated. I know you're a busy guy. Going by the amount of times that we mention your name on our reviews, it seems to be like every third reviewer, like it produced by Lewis Johns. Oh yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, I don't have a life, so.
It seems like you're in kind of high demand right now. It feels to us like you've been super busy, but is that the case? Have you been really busy, or just like have you had a load of stuff all just come out at the same time?
I have been really busy. Yeah, I have been busy. Yeah. I think since the pandemic, it kind of just kicked off, really.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, no, and also probably had loads of stuff released at the same time, as it usually happens. But yeah, no, it's always busy. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It seems to have affected different people differently, because we spoke to Brad about the same thing, and he was just like, not so much, but like going by what you're saying, it's kind of picked up. But just do you think that's just because people were kind of holding back on stuff with the whole everything being kind of locked down? They were just waiting and then hoping that everything was going to open up and they would release albums again.
I think there was a lot of people that were booked in just before the pandemic hit, and obviously the pandemic happened. Right. So loads of people were sitting on stuff for ages, and then obviously there was nothing to do. So many bands ended up just fucking writing loads of records. So I was lucky, really, because as soon as the doors opened again, it was like, record after record after record. Especially probably for the first 6 months, it was probably one of the busiest times I've had. But to be honest, even in the pandemic, I was still mixing stuff. I still, because this is my little mix space here, so a lot of the time I was just finishing records, and luckily there were a lot of records I had to mix. Also, a lot of people ended up doing a lot of stuff from home as well, so it ended up being still quite creative, weirdly.
Yeah.
In terms of your approach to this as well, do you find, because we've been speaking almost since kind of the lockdown got lifted, there does seem to be, whether or not this is just we're listening to a lot more music from the UK at the moment, but there does seem to be this kind of monumental shift in quality just now, specifically in the UK scene. Do you think that's a kind of effect of something like a lockdown? So bands, like you say, spent that time just in writing mode and crafting and, kind of reassessing what they're doing, spending the time that generally they wouldn't have if there was deadlines with labels, etc. Or do you just think it's just an organic thing? Bands are just getting better because the bands around them are just getting better.
I think it's maybe a bit of both. Obviously, if a band's on their fourth album or something like that, then they're going to be much better and much better writing and playing and everything since record one. So a band like Rolo, for instance, they've obviously gotten better and better and better as they've gone along, but they've had over 10 years to sort of craft it. So, but yeah, definitely a part of the pandemic, I think, has kind of helped that, because a lot of bands that would have been on schedules to be like, oh, okay, we need to release an album at this time, suddenly they couldn't do it. So maybe they could sit back a little bit more and go okay, let's just figure this out a little bit more, do more pre-production, listen to the songs over and over and over until we don't hate them anymore, that kind of vibe. So definitely a bit of both.
And does that does that have another effect though from your position? Do you think that bands maybe, is there a negative side to having too much time to write songs? Does that like come with and you don't have to mention any names, but does that come with like a degree of baggage in there where people have a vision of what they want to achieve that just maybe isn't necessarily attainable?
Yeah, it's called demoitis. It's a big thing. It's a really big thing. Because remember, if someone's sat on a record that they've written for like a year, they've usually recorded demos and they've usually listened to it every day for that time. So by the time they hit the studio, it's really difficult for a band to then turn around. And if you go, actually, we should get rid of this chorus here, or actually we should do this, they're going, what the fuck? Like, that's how I've heard it for the last year. Luckily for me, though, I do a lot of pre-production with bands. So generally there is a lot of back and forth before they even come into the studio. So 9 times out of 10, it's okay. But every now and then, a band has pretty bad demoitis, and you have to really sort of coax it out of them to do something differently. But
sometimes it works the opposite way, because we just reviewed the Septic Flesh album, and they'd said obviously they had their stuff recorded, and then everything locked down, and then they had this huge period where they could kind of go back and start to refine the tracks. Now, we obviously never heard the original version of that. It might have been better, but I certainly felt like there was a lot more attention to detail on that new album, just because of the fact it had the tracks for so long. They were able to sit on them and just kind of put a bit more kind of detail and attention to them. So yeah, I suppose it could work in both ways. We've also seen a lot of the kind of home studio stuff is quite popular just now as well. Obviously, just coming off the last year, a lot of the albums that we've had in. It seems to be bands are kind of working on their stuff at home, and some of them have been pretty decent actually. Like we've heard a few that have actually been not too bad. You couldn't have really have told the difference. Others not so much, but just one of those things, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, technology is so good now that you can write and record an album from home and give it to the right mixer, and it sounds brilliant.
True.
Yeah, like
as long as I know how to record.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised the kind of shit I have to mix sometimes, man. Like, honestly,
I've been there too. Like, copy-pasted left channel to right channel guitar. You're like, why has this suddenly gone to mono? What the fuck? Oh, you lazy bastard. You copy-pasted.
Oh, man, I literally had that a couple of weeks ago.
Names, but...
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I did, yeah.
I'm not the only one.
No, still get it now. Don't you worry.
Oh, Jesus.
I do think it's kind of the pandemic did force people to write in a different way, though, because, suddenly people couldn't get in the same room as each other. So people learned how to record. I was having so many messages from people at home being like, I've just bought a little interface and I've got Logic and can you tell me how to record? And I was like, no, that takes years.
Let me just give you all my trade secrets and do myself out of future work. It was like because we reviewed the new Puppy album that's just come out, and their story absolutely fascinated me in that they just spent the time building a studio and learning how to do it. That's how they approached it that time, and I mean, it does sound like the previous album does sound more polished, but there was a part of listening to it where I was like, that I appreciate the fact that you kind of pulled yourself from the bootstraps. You could have just used that time and done it. There was plenty of people I know that spent lockdown watching movies and playing computer games. You know what I mean? And you didn't do that. You went away, and they openly said in their statement, we can't record drums, so we had to get someone in to do drums. That was the guitar stuff, fine. Vocals, yeah, fine. We'll work that out. But drums, weren't going to touch that, so we got someone in to help us with that aspect. But I suppose there's kind of the technology thing is a good thing in that, like you said, bands that are remote as well. Like some of these European bands, one guy lives in Czechoslovakia, the other guy lives in Germany, and they were able to collaborate and write music over huge distances because they physically couldn't get in a studio somewhere.
See what you did there, Duncan.
Yeah, do you see what I did there? And that's what I wanted. But then, from the other side of that, though, I don't know. I like the idea of like you said, that sounding board, that kind of idea of, we've talked about before, sometimes bands can go so into the weeds with what they think, that quality control of someone independent from the band saying, does that section need to be there? You know, like, do we need to play this riff for 2.5 minutes? You know, like there's that sort of level of, you know, it's the same in movie making or, you know, in artistry or photography or anything. That idea of having someone as a kind of sounding board, independent from the band, to voice things, the band doesn't have to follow it, but to be able to say, well, I think is a really important aspect of just music creation in general. I suppose from your point of view, is that a frustration if bands don't take that advice on, or is that at the end of the day, they're paying you for a service, so the customer's always right? In quotation marks for those listening to
bands
the
are never right. Come on. No, I think in terms of that kind of stuff, yeah, I don't know, like it's tricky because I a lot of this work I do now is mixing, and a lot of mixes I've been doing are records that are self-produced, and sometimes you sit there and go, this could be great, this is almost great, but if they only just had someone there just to be like, shorten that bit, do that, make this chorus way bigger than chorus 1, like that kind of thing, this could have been amazing, but it's not. I do think it's massively important, and I think that's something I try to do on all the records I'm producing. I'm pretty much producing them properly. I'm sitting down with the band, we've got back and forth, we're doing songwriting, we're like, you know, that sort of involvement I think is what makes a record go from good to great.
In
my opinion.
Yeah. You're based at the Ranch production house in Southampton with a few other producers and engineers. How did this all start? Was it something that was planned for yourself, or did you just kind of fall into it?
So my dad was an engineer back in the day, so I was quite lucky, really. Okay. So even when I was growing up, like, he had a studio in our loft, and he had a tape machine, and like, you know, so proper like analog console, stuff like that. So as soon as I was old enough that he kind of let me touch the stuff, I started to learn how to record bands. Apparently, he told me the other day, he was like, yeah, he used to come up and like turn stuff on and off, and you blew up one of my like compressors or something because you were just going like this for ages. but like, yeah, so I basically, it was something that I always knew that I wanted to do, and even from like a really early age, I think from about 13, I started recording my own band, and then friends' bands and stuff. You know, I'd have a friend's band from school like come and record for the weekend, and they'd pay me like 20 quid or something, and we just set everything up in my lounge, in my kitchen, like shit like that. My parents luckily were totally cool with it, but for the longest time, that's kind of something I've always known I wanted to do, really. I've also played in bands and done the sort of touring thing and stuff like that, and like I really, really love doing that side of things and songwriting and everything. But like, for me, production was always the big thing. Right.
Okay. And do you still play in bands just now, or is that kind of just backburner?
Oh no.
No.
No. Like probably the last band I played in was probably about 2014, 2015, something like that. I played in a band called Good Time Boys, and we did a big tour in the States, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with bands now. But yeah, I still like songwriting. Like I still do songwriting, and I'm writing an album for someone at the moment, actually. So.
Nice.
And being in a location where there's a collective of people that are in the industry around you, do you find that inspires you collaboratively, or is there a competitive nature there at all, or do you have much interaction with the people that are around you?
Yeah, I see them all the time. Yeah, it's definitely collaborative. It's not we're not like fighting for anything like that. In fact, actually, me and Neil. So Neil is the owner of the studio. And me and him did like a co-production recently where he sort of produced the band and then I mixed it. So we do some stuff like that. Like,
cool.
which works pretty well.
Nice.
That's cool. That's cool.
I feel like it's quite a common thing with producers that sit together in a group. Like I was with some guys in North Carolina, and they sent me stuff all the time. Like I'm sat here in Norway, but they're in North Carolina. They're always sending me stuff like, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" And I'm sending it back to them. Like, so I think it's quite common, but I think it's better that way as well. That producers talk to each other about mixes and about productions, about what's going on, because you can get so in your head about some of this stuff, and like.
Absolutely.
I like this. It's kind of like the psychiatrist in The Sopranos having a psychiatrist.
I still get massive imposter syndrome, so like I'm always just sending mixes to like some of my favourite like kind of UK mixes. Going, does this sound crap? Like, is this good? I don't know. I can't tell anymore.
Which blows my mind because like we've spoken about like Rolo Tomassi this year. That album, if it's not topping lists, it's near the top of lists this year. It's fucking impeccable. And like you mentioned it yourself, that's a band that's been on the go for a while and are clearly, like every album, the confidence is more there, the kind of songwriting's leveling up. But to me, it's just the most accomplished thing they've done, and a lot of that comes down to not only the song composition but the way it's captured. Like the mix is just like you can pick out everything, and in a band like that in the past when you've listened to previous mixes, I've been of the opinion that maybe like the synths were a bit loud in some parts, maybe we should go down a little bit, these sort of things, but everything is so immaculate. In terms of your involvement with them on that, when does that begin with a band like Rolo Tomassi? Is that months out? Is that weeks out? Is it, how does that come to fruition?
Yeah, so that record, we probably started sending back and forth maybe up to about 8 months before they came in, something like that.
Right.
I would at least have like some demos of some songs. And actually, like I remember, like I was sat here when I got sent some of the first demos. I think it was maybe Pre-Science, maybe, like that track they sent me first. And instantly I was like, oh, this would be really sick if we put some horns on the end of the track and like do this. So that stuff like happens usually pretty quickly. Like especially as a producer, when you're hearing something for the first time, you're always thinking of ways that it can like make it better or, add to the track somehow. So yeah, like a record like that it kind of starts quite early, and then by the time they come in, you've got a very, very good vision and a good idea on what they want to do. And then if we do decide to change anything, they know it inside out. So we can literally just go, do you know what? This isn't working now we're here. Let's change it. Let's do something else. And a band like Rolo is a really good example of like, I think that if you've worked with a band on a couple of records, I think you get to know them so well that you get to that point where, it's much easier for me to produce a record with that band because I know exactly how to handle them. They know how to handle me. I know that if we fall out about something, which sometimes we do, like that's fine. It's not like, we're going to talk the next day and we're going to figure it out. And that's all part of the creative process.
You kind of have to, like, there has to be a level, on some level, if you're not passionate about something, if you're not willing to like genuinely fight about even if you're wrong, like even at the end of the day, even if it's the worst bit ever, if you're not necessarily a creative, if you're not prepared to do that, but as long as like kind of sense wins out at the end of the day, I suppose that's all that matters. Like in terms of like as well on that record, is that one of those ones that, like, from your position doing so much work in the industry, do you get, like, is there like a spidey sense, like, so to speak, of something where you're like that, oh, this is going to be huge, like, and how often is that right? Like, how many times do you think you've predicted that something's going to elevate a band or become really, really popular that's actually landed, and or vice versa?
I definitely thought doing that record that this is something special. Sometimes I'll do something and I'll be like, this is going to blow up, and it doesn't. But I don't think that's necessarily sometimes down to the record or the band. Sometimes it's the team around them. now Rolo have a really, really good team around them. So, their management, their label, their A&R is fucking wicked. Like, they're doing a lot for them on this record. So, that's the reason why it's kind of probably more people have heard this one compared to the last one on the label that we shall not mention anymore. So, like sometimes you do something and you're like, yeah, this is fucking great. This is going to blow up, and it just doesn't. And who can predict it? I can't predict what's going to be really popular at the moment. Like some stuff that is really popular, I'm like, this sounds fucking shit. But people obviously like it, so who am I to say?
We sometimes like. I sometimes feel like I'm the last angry man shouting at a cloud about how good something is, and then like we'll sit there and like absolutely glow. It's unusual that all three of us like kind of Voltron up on our grades. We tend to there's always a degree difference there, but there are other occasions where we're like, this is incredible, and then we see other publications online or we see reactions in general, and within like 3-4 months people are just not talking about that release anymore, and there's an aspect of just the sheer volume of music that's out there now it's very difficult, and there are certain labels that we won't mention, but they know who they are because I dare say they can probably fill in the blanks whenever I don't mention the label, that we're releasing albums of the same genre like every second week. And it's just like, if I'm a band on that label, like what makes my release so special if 2 weeks later the same noise is being made about a release which is in the same genre and kind of very similar sounding, and then 2 weeks after that there's another one, then 2 weeks after that there's another one. It's like a constant uphill struggle to stay kind of relevant. So like yourself, I find that. And there's an age thing as well. I'm getting on now, so like there's a part of me that feels like that. There's maybe a disconnect that I don't understand why people get as excited about certain things. But like, it's the like, especially now. There used to be a time in heavier music anyway. You could generally predict roughly on the back of what was popular what bands were going to be successful. And nowadays, I just think. Like there's subgenres that have subgenres that have subgenres, and at that point you just can't keep up with it. So you must have a ball trying to work all this stuff out.
Yeah, man, I feel you there. Like sometimes I'm like, I mean, why is this popular? Like, why people listen to this? But other times I'm like, why this band is fucking massive? I don't get it. Yeah. Maybe it's an age thing too. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Dave, you've got a question. I was about to jump in there, but I've asked like the last 6.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Obviously, like you've worked with a lot of kind of bigger named bands over the last few years, like Rolo and Employed to Serve and Svalbard and Loathe and stuff. But what's cool is we've noticed is like in between those kind of bigger named bands, you also get these other little kind of nuggets that come in, like your Chalk Hands or Baylor or something like that. So. Is that a conscious thing from you? Is that like obviously you're working with a lot of bigger bands, but do you try and kind of slot in these like more kind of unknown bands in between, or is that just the kind of way that it's kind of panned out?
Yeah, definitely. If I think I can bring something to the table and the budget's there to do it properly, and I love it, then I'll work on it definitely. The only times I won't do that stuff like that is when they come to me and I'm like, well, this needs a good amount of time, and maybe they don't really have the budget to see it through to make that kind of really good. In which case, I might still try and suggest, okay, maybe you could record with someone else, and maybe I could mix it, or something like that. So, I mean, I guess it's conscious, but it all depends, really. It all depends. Like, I'm still self-employed at the end of the day, so if I see a slot in the diary, I'm sometimes like, oh, maybe that would be good there, or something like that. So you never know. And I don't think anyone's past just saying no to stuff just because it's not on a big label or something. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, remember Ross Robinson once produced Vanilla Ice, so
fucking sick.
Does that mean? I mean, money's money.
And I still love Ross Robinson.
I do it.
I'd do it too. Imagine saying that. Yeah, I produce Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
I got to tell that motherfucker what to do.
Yeah, I mean, like we still are at the point where we get really excited when we hear a certain producer is involved with a band that we like.
Oh God, yeah.
You know, whenever I read the name Kurt Ballou or Ross Robinson or Frederick Nordstrom or Terry Date or whatever, we're like, oh yes, like we're totally hyped to hear like what's coming, or Bob Rock, because you know he created the greatest snare sound of all time, you know what I mean, whatever. But
hell yeah, he did.
He gets so much hate mail for that right now, Dave. Even though I totally agree with you, you're going to get so much hate mail right now.
Do you have that same buzz, like when you hear like a band that you're like are paired up with a producer that, you know, someone that you really admire as a producer? Do you still get excited by that?
I'm massively excited. And sometimes I really love it if I'm listening to a record for the first time and I go, fuck, this production sounds so good. I wonder who did it. And I look it up and it's like someone that I absolutely love has produced it. Like, I think that's really, really cool. Yeah. That actually happened to me recently with something. I was listening to Kimbra. I don't know if you've heard Kimbra. It's like, it's kind of like along the poppier side of things, but her record, she collaborated with like Flying Lotus and Ben from Dillinger's like on it and stuff like that. Like, it's really, really cool, eclectic record. Cool. And I was listening to it going, some of the sound design is so sick on this. Like, I wonder who did it. Looked it up, and it's Rich Costey, who was one of my like most favorite producers ever. And I was like, of course he fucking did it. It sounds brilliant. So yeah, I still get that buzz. And I used to like love just looking on the back of records and seeing like who did a record. If I thought a record sounded amazing, I was like, who the fuck did this? I must look up what else they've done and also get really, really into that kind of shit. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're the same. Like, even like if an album comes in with a press release and I read through it and there's no mention of who's recorded it or who's produced it, I'm like, I need to find out. I can't do this review without mentioning who actually was in charge of this. So a lot of times we have to go to the band themselves and be like, who recorded this, who produced it, just so we can like put it on the reviews. I think it's quite an important thing that often gets missed. I think
it's why I've enjoyed doing the interviews that we have done. Like, so there's like, I think, not that I'm saying that you guys don't, you're completely unsung heroes, but I think when like music reviews happen, I think a lot of time is spent on the craft, which, I mean, it has to. So ultimately that band's going to be taking those songs out on the road and playing them, and you know, there's a craftsmanship there. I think it's often overlooked, the work that helps it get there. And like, a lot of reviews can spend, like, whether it's a written review, it could be one line, you know, saying, well, the production's really good in this. Elaborate on that. What do you mean by the production's really good on this? It's just a blanket statement, you know what I mean? Like, there's obviously a lot of work that's went into it. So getting a chance to speak to people in your industry, I think is hugely important, especially for people that are out there in bands or listening just in general, to understand that there's another side to create music, and it's all part of the package that kind of goes, you know, out there to listen to. And it's something that I think, once again, like even when you watch any movie where any band's being produced, it's 3 shots of a fader going up or down, and that's it. That's all the producer did, and move on. Then the band's on tour.
It's just moving faders, man.
More. It's just moving faders. It's like really, it's kind of, on some level, it's kind of diminished. And what I found really interesting is, just from speaking to record producers and mix and masters and all the rest, like, you get that, like, everyone has a completely different approach. At times you'll have synchronicities where we hear the same line or the same idea or the same kind of one thing that you all kind of like all agree on disparately. But for the most part, you all come from completely different perspectives, and that makes sense because you all bring something different to the mix. Like that with the aforementioned Rolo Tomassi album, if that's mixed, if it's recorded, mixed and mastered by different group of people, the songs are going to sound different. You know, it's going to be a different vibe. It's going to be all those things. So it's just equally as important as that. As a result of that, like, coming to my question, how much of that are you aware of then in your job? Like, because obviously you're, like you said before, you're there working in collaboration with the band. You're helping them, in some respects, song structure as well, giving your opinion on that and giving them the best sound that they have. How much of that weighs on your mind as well then, that ultimately that will be a part that, you know, people that listen to. If you're a Bob Rock, you'll get accused of putting faders up too loud. All these. How much of that is like embedded in the mind that I like? All right, this is a bold choice. We want horns at the end of this song. Some people might hate it. They might think the band's sold out, but it's really needed for this part.
I mean, I think production can make or break a record, to be honest. Like the amount of records I've listened to sometimes where I've been like, if only this had brilliant production, this would be incredible. And and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes I hear a production, I'm like, fuck, it's so good, but where the fuck are the songs? Like, so I think it's I mean, it's all part of it, isn't it? Like songwriting, production, mixing, everything is a part of it. But yeah, I think there's certain records that if I think back to my kind of favorite records, if I think of like Deftones, for instance, is a really good example. Deftones, White Pony, that drum sound, would they still be the same band? Would that still stick in my memory, that record, if it didn't have that snare sounding like that? Like, so I think it's that sort of sonic imprint is really, really important on a record. And that's something I try to impart on everything I'm doing. And the thing that I will try and impart is like, not necessarily that I want it to be an amazing production or like really sonically brilliant, but it has to bring some sort of vibe or some sort of character to the record that suits those songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed actually on your mixes that it's very much a part of the band. Yeah, it's like you bring out what's in the band. It doesn't seem like you've put together a bunch of templates and just slapped it on top. You've worked with them very well and done your job properly, which is very good, because we've heard a lot of stuff otherwise it sounds a bit templatey. They've just
it's the Instagram filter that I keep talking about. It's the filter you put on to make things sound heavy. It's like you can hear it, and there are certain bands that are almost like you cannot differentiate between bands because of certain producers have certain sounds and certain things preset in there, and they like to use that, and like that's why the bands have went there. They've went there and said, I want to sound like these guys. And the downside of that is sometimes they come out sounding exactly like those guys as opposed to sounding like yourself, but with a production that's similar.
I think the problem with a lot of modern production now, and it's amazing that everyone can do stuff from home, and but like the thing that's missing from modern production is the fact that like everyone ends up using the same drum samples, and they end up using the same guitar effects, and like so there's this whole like.
This is literally Kyle's bugbearer. This is like Kyle's bugbearer is like that.
It's so true, man. Like, and that's the thing. Like people have lost the art of like actually engineering. The thing that makes a record great isn't the fucking kicked 10 sample that you use on the kick or whatever. Like it's picking
Steven
out
Slate number 5, isn't it?
yeah, classic. But like that's what I mean. Or it's not using Neuro DSP, for instance. I mean, some of those plugins are amazing, but like learn to mic a cab and make it sound your own thing. Like you don't have to just copy what someone else is doing, So I think it's really important to be able to go in a room and go, okay, I want drums to sound like this, but I'm going to tune them in this kind of way and mic them in this kind of way, and then I can get this kind of sound. And rather than just going, oh yeah, that one, okay, cool, yeah, right,
yeah. we had Jakob Bredel on 2 months ago or something, and we were talking about there's a specific YouTube video of him working with, what band is it?
Lifesick, I think it was.
Oh, Lifesick. And how many hours did he spend?
They go through just, I don't even know how many snares it was, but they go through all these snares, the guy hitting different snares, and you can see Jacob's face, he's just like had enough. And then it gets to the end of the clip and is like, I think I'm going to go with the first one. I think I'm going to go with the first. It's just like, what?
I've definitely had that. I've had it with guitar amps sometimes. Where people have been like, or I've gone into a session and gone, like, I've been thinking, I think this amp and this cab is probably going to be really suited for this. And they go, yeah, can we try the other 10 amps you've got as well, though? And I go, oh, okay, but I still think that first one's probably going to be the best one. And then you end up plugging everything in, and then they go, let's listen to that first one again. Yeah, that's the one, isn't it? Yeah, funny that. I'm a producer, and I made that decision fucking 3 months ago. So But that is also the fun of it as well. Sometimes you'll end up trying, like let's say snare drums, for instance. You know, you might try something completely different to what you were thinking, but actually it sounds cool because that human that's playing that drum will play it differently to another human.
Yeah.
It's in anger, obviously.
There's another thing actually. Now that
it always comes back to anger. Around my neck, he never gets respect. He never gets respect.
I've heard a lot in the songs you've produced. There's not so much like studio fuckery, like time alignment and editing like that. Is that a conscious choice on your part, or is that just you feel like the band doesn't need it?
It depends on the band, to be honest, man. Like, you know, because sometimes, like a band like Loathe, for instance, they want drums to be on the grid 100%, and you know that's kind of their sound, so that's what you have to do. Whereas a band like Rolo doesn't need to do that. You know, he can have some push and pull on his drums, and that's what makes it sound like he's playing it. So it kind of depends. I'm never like really heavy on the editing side. I'm never usually 100% on everything. Even if it's even if it has to be to the grid, I'm still like let stuff like fills or something be a bit looser, or I don't like overly tighten guitars or anything like that. Like, you know, so I do still try and leave a human element in it.
Yeah. I'm glad about that, because there's been so many bands I've heard recently. The past couple of years, it's just everything's on the grid all the time for seemingly no reason. So it was almost refreshing to hear that, you know, there's some humans playing this music.
It's OCD. It's OCD. If it's not on the grid, then the world will spin backwards, Kyle. It'll spin backwards.
There's an amazing video I watched of I think it was like a Rick Beato one or something. And he's talking about Led Zeppelin and like John Bonham, and he goes like, okay, obviously John Bonham was never quantized, and that's what makes him amazing. But like, I'm going to quantize his drums, and he's got a stem for something, I can't remember what track, and he ends up like quantizing it, and it sounds fucking awful. It like takes all of his feel out, like it sounds dreadful, and it's like you don't need to quantize everything. Like, you know, just leave it. If it sounds good and someone's got groove and they're good at playing behind the beat or in front of the beat or whatever, like, just leave it. If it sounds cool, leave it.
Yeah, it's also not how people play. Like, I mean, some people will be, like, some people are almost like human metronomes, but for the most part, it's not. And there are certain styles of music where that totally works. Like on the industrial side of music, like being like specifically like quantized and on the beat like that totally makes sense, because that's how that probably should sound. And when it was recorded, it might not have been by a human anyway. It might have been someone sitting down with a machine doing that. That might have a live drummer and a live setting. But it is that thing where, like, when there are like bands, especially in this genre of all genres, if there was ever one where, I mean, it's all about aggression, passion, you know, delivery, being yourself, being true to yourself. I do feel there is that element of when you spend too much time moving things over like milliseconds, you are kind of removing something about that quality that's in there, that makes those bands sound like, because that's, once again, that's not how that band will play live. And the best albums to me are the ones that, as soon as I'm finished listening to, I want to see that live. Like Dillinger is one of those great examples. When you listen to a Dillinger album, you want to see that live, and you want it to be as chaotic as the images that it paints in your brain when you're listening to it. So it's part of that. If all those elements aren't in there and it sounds like a machine, then you might as well just sit at home and listen to it and not see it live, because the personality is almost kind of removed from it in a lot of respects. How much tugging do you have to do? That's a terrible word. How much back and forth do you have to... I don't even know why I said that. It's not a word that I use often either. That's a lie. That's a terrible lie. How much like back and forth would you have to do with a band? Are there occasions where a band will come back and say, you know, that the drumming maybe is just a little bit, or my guitar playing there, I would much rather it was moved. Do you find on a musician level that can be like, you could be like having conversations where you're like, no, this is just, it's fine the way it is, and you, like you were saying, that demoitis, where people are like, they're so invested in that sound that, you know, they're lost in you're almost in the minutia of fixing things that aren't an issue, or is it as a case of that, you know, when you get to a certain point, bands, because everyone's different, you know, but are bands at a certain point when you're getting close to the end a bit more like, right, we know this, guys, like, Lewis Johns has got it, it's cool, baby, we're all right? Or do you find that you, like, right to the end, you could still be having those back and forths?
I think that most of the time people kind of trust me, to be honest. I don't think I've had it many times where a band would be like, oh, that needs to be tighter or something like that. But yeah, I mean, and usually I think it's such a big part of the production process to make sure that the performance and everything is like as you'd imagine it. That I'm very much like a record, let's say drums, for instance, record drums, and then I'll sit down and I'll edit them, you know, maybe not with the person, but like them on hand, so I can be like, okay, is this the kind of vibe? Are these the kind of feels that we kind of thought, you know? And there might be a bit of back and forth on that side of things. But generally, people are pretty trusting, I think. When you're invested in coming in to do like a record for a month with a producer, like, I think you've usually had quite a lot of conversations beforehand about vibe and like where you want to go with it. So the best thing to do really is like try and just, you know, let the guy do his job. And actually you can tell that the bands that really haven't been in the studio that much, because they're the ones that will sit over your shoulder and say like, oh, is that right? Is that right? Is that right? It's like, trust me, it'll be good. Don't worry. I know you're hearing that weird edit now, but like I'm hearing it too. I'm sat in front of the speakers, so yeah. Sometimes, yeah, you have to sort of do that. But to be honest, day one when I'm sitting there with my fucking pitch pipe trying to tune drums to minor thirds, usually people are like, "Oh, we'll leave him to it. I think he's got this."
Yeah. Go and get a coffee.
It's going to take all day. Get 7 coffees.
Nice.
I suppose like the next logical question is, like, you're obviously a busy guy, you're doing lots of things, and I know you're in an industry that is kind of tight-lipped about what's on the horizon. Like, no one likes to give anything away. Is there any details of anything that you can give us? Or is this a case of we have to hit stop here and make sure it's off the record?
There was one came to mind actually, because we played a track on a podcast or a couple of podcasts ago, and I think it might have been yourself, Lewis, that worked on it. Was the new Ithaca track? Is that something you worked on?
Dude.
Oh yeah. So that record's coming out in July, I think. They've released like 2 tracks from it so far. That record is fucking awesome.
Fucking sounds amazing is what it sounds.
Thanks, man.
So down on that, by the way.
Hell yeah.
Fucking love it, man. Absolutely love it.
Oh, the record's so good. So good. And I think that people are going to be quite surprised because it's quite different to the first one, but it's really cool. It's really expansive. There's loads of extra production stuff. Like, we really went to town on that record. So yeah, I think people hopefully are going to like it. I like it.
Nice.
I actually can't wait. Like, we didn't. When we played that track, I wasn't aware of them working on anything. It's one of those things where you lose track of. Like I said, it's just the sheer volume of music. You lose track of certain bands, and sometimes, like, I found in the past, I can miss an entire album from a band, and you're coming in going like that. Oh, they've not done anything in like 4 years, and then you go online and you're like, well, no, they've actually. How have they released an album and an EP in the time in between? But I'd like, just from those 2 singles, like kind of the Rolo Tomassi sort of thing of like that, just feels like things are leveling up in the best possible way. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So
it's very good.
Well played.
Yep.
Cheers.
But anything else you can give us details on, or? Because I'll do that. I'll just put someone on the spot. It's my job. It's not my show.
There's a couple of things I probably can't talk about, but I am working with a band.
Are you going to anyway, right?
No.
Can't do it. Like, Kyle, you can't.
This year, the ones I'm really
bands, just shout out bands.
The ones I'm really looking forward to this year are Burner, a band called Burner, which you should all check out if you've not checked them out already.
Yeah,
they're really bloody good.
Yep.
They're booked in to do an album. Actually, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that actually, but they're booked into an album.
I can edit. You just let us know afterwards, and I can take it out. So and Dave will just put like you went into a tunnel or something. We lost connection for a second.
Yeah, there's a lot this year, man. Like my diary's booked up till December or something. So yeah, there is a lot.
That's amazing.
A lot coming
that's really,
in.
really, really good.
And some stuff I'm very excited about. So,
do you like in the position that you're in as well? Are there certain bands that you would like reach out to in the past and then say, listen, I really like you guys. If you are doing an album somewhere down the road and want to collaborate, want to work together, reach out, or is it more a case of you are that busy that it's they'll find me?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, to be honest. Like, so I mean, I don't really reach out nowadays because I sort of feel like a lot of the bands I'm working, well, a lot of the bands that I'd maybe want to work with in our particular scene probably would contact me already if they wanted to work for me. So I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't really want to be like a pushy salesman. Come on, guys, come and work with me. There's a couple of bands I would really love to work with, which I'll do. Hey, sorry, what was that? Yeah, again, like I don't want to be that guy to message him. But like in the past, I remember I saw a live video of Conjurer like ages ago, and I contacted them being like, you guys are fucking awesome. What are you doing recording wise? Because I would obviously love to do it. And that led on to me mixing that first EP and then doing Maya. So sometimes it does lead on to that kind of stuff, But I would only ever contact the band if I felt really passionate that I could really bring something to it. If I didn't feel like I could bring something to it, then I just would not bother, because there's a million other people out there that will probably do a much better job than me.
Modesty, I like it though. I like it. I like that. I suppose like the last question from me is like you're obviously. I know that we've spoken to some people in the past that try not to listen to a huge amount of what other bands are doing and other like adjacent genres as a way to maybe not be overtly influenced in styles and techniques or even approaches to how they do things. Are you that way inclined? Are you still like as a music fan? Are you still avidly listening to stuff that's like you coming out on the regular, or do you have a particular sound, a particular style, and a particular era that you stick to, and you're quite comfortable there, and what's happening around you is happening around you, and that's cool.
Well, just in terms of my own music taste, you mean, or?
Yeah, like just in terms of like when you're like listening, because everything we listen to has like if you're a musician, I imagine if you're where you are, it has an impact. You listen to something, you like it, you think, I wonder how that's done, and then you go away and work it out yourself. Are you still doing that at the level that you're at? Is every day still a school day, or are you at that stage now that you kind of feel like your level that you've got your setup, you've got your sound, you've got your bands, and that's.
No, I mean, every day is a school day. I think if you ever feel like you've learnt enough, then you might as well just give up. I'm always trying to better myself. And like what you were saying with taking influence from other people, I don't always try to take influence from stuff within the genre that I predominantly record. So I'm listening to a lot of other stuff. Like Kimber record, for instance, is amazing, and there's loads of stuff on that record. I'm like, how the fuck do they make that sound? And just a lot of kind of stuff like that. Really, I've gotten really into. I'm slowly delving down the rabbit hole of modular synthesis at the moment. So I'm and that's all really new to me. So I'm now trying to figure out that. I just bought a Moog and stuff, so.
Oh, yes.
I feel like
we'll never see him again. That's him. This is the last time he does an interview or an album.
See you later.
Go to the weeds on that
I'll turn
stuff.
up in 30 years' time with a massive grey beard, just sat in my room with all these patch cables everywhere.
Lewis Johns changed his name to Gandalf the Grey for no reason at all.
Have you heard my new album? It's called Cable Wizard.
It's like there's a thing as well. From your point of view, like just on a tangent off the back of that question, then, like from your point of view, is that because you have a professional curiosity in the inner workings of that, or is that you already thinking about how you can start and like maybe suggesting or even incorporating stuff like that into potential future collaborations, projects, or whatever?
I mean, it's a bit of both, to be honest. Like, I think that I've always done that with records ever since I was younger. Like, you hear something and you go, I wonder how they did that. Or, like, you know, you hear a drum sound or something. Like, I wonder how they tuned the snare on that. Like, that kind of thing. So it's that curiosity, I think, that never really leaves, like, an engineer, really. But, like, yeah, definitely. If I can figure out a way that I can then bring that to something that I'm doing, then amazing, because all I'm doing is expanding my tools. Really, it's what's going to maybe make the records I'm doing hopefully a little bit different, or like maybe you know, that kind of vibe. So, and yeah, I don't know, like stuff like Rolo, like that record, a lot of the influences sound design wise were stuff like Hans Zimmer, like, you know, so it's that.
There is we mentioned it on our review. It did feel like a movie score in parts.
Oh, cool.
It felt huge.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's intentional.
Yeah, it certainly comes through when you're listening to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there's always a curiosity there to learn all the time, or there is for me anyway. I'm still like buying fucking courses online and, you know, reading articles about how to do certain things. Like, it never stops, really.
Yeah.
It's always something new to learn in sound engineering. It's like, oh, I've never recorded that instrument. How the fuck would you do that? And then you go down and you figure it out, or you don't.
You fuck it up for ages, and then one day you do it properly, and you go, "Oh yeah, that's how you do it." Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah. 10 years wasted.
So, like, I remember, like, because I don't come to it like at all from a studied audio technology, but I was shit at it, which is why I don't do it. I get trusted in mixing the levels of our voices, and that is it's unlikely I can fuck that up. It's still possible, but it's unlikely I can fuck that up. But I always remember, I like to think I have a really good ear for music, though, and I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, like my favourite band. And on the song The Fragile, the drum sounds like broken glass. There's a particular hit that comes in on a beat, and it sounds like broken glass. And for the longest time, I couldn't work out what it was until I actually saw them live. And it's as simple as that I could have kicked myself in the tits when I saw it. But it's as simple as they put a tambourine on top of the floor tom, and he hits it.
Oh yeah,
it's like a rattle noise, and I was like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" It's like, how did he do that? Was he actually playing a bag of broken glass? No, that's just what he did. And now it all makes sense, and the 3-year journey to try and work it out is now ruined.
Oh man, I love stuff like that though.
But yeah,
I love it.
I was like, oh, that's such a clever idea.
I mean, they probably have also recorded. They've probably also sampled broken glass.
He probably did record broken. Yeah, he probably was a bag of broken glass to begin with. But one of those things where you just like sit and, that's different.
Bjork's another one to do that too. That is a whole fucking rabbit hole of sounds that I'm like, what is happening there? But yeah, that's what she does. A lot of the records, she just samples weird noises and hits and stuff and makes them into drum beats, and that's fucking rad.
I got like marginally obsessed with. There's a Swedish artist called, although she's changed her name, but it was I Am I Who Am I, and I like huge fucking. It was like an audio visual project. And I like went down the deepest, darkest rabbit hole, and I had just assumed from the sound originally, there was a collective team of wizards in the background crafting all these electronic layers. Two people, like a producer, vocalist. That's it. and like a producer, vocalist, and all the time, like that thing from Harry Potter that they can stop time and go back, like clearly that, because it's so densely layered and so well executed. But yeah, it's like you could. This is why I'm just giving you a public service warning about the Moog. Like genuinely, we might never see you again. So just.
Oh yeah, I know. Don't worry. I've definitely been down the rabbit hole a little bit. Luckily, it came and then it was actually broken, so I had to send it straight back off again to get repaired. So at least I could get the last 2 weeks worth of work done. Whereas if it wasn't broken, I'd be fucked.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, I genuinely like the Ithaca stuff is the thing that I'm most excited for. And Dave obviously withheld the details that you worked on that. And I'm too lazy to look up online. So
Pretty sure I mentioned that.
I'm sure you didn't, Dave. I would have remembered that conversation. It would have been the first thing we mentioned when we started.
An album that we reviewed. Was it last year? I think it was last year. There's a Danish band called LLNN.
Oh yeah.
Put out an album called, I think it was Unmaker is the name of the album, but they're quite good at that as well. There's a whole video on YouTube, but they recorded a whole ton of sounds in it was like a blacksmith's. So it's all like chunks of metal and stuff that they've been hitting with different things, and then they modulated them in the studio afterwards and kind of incorporated it into their sound. So it's like a post-apocalyptic type kind of metal sound.
Like the sound of the end of the planet.
It's really cool.
It's the fucking heaviest thing I heard last year. It got to the point where like I actually felt my brain rattling when listening to it. So dense, so dense. There's a thing then off the back of that. Is there a point where you think I've done too much? Do you ever get to that stage where you're like, this is maybe one element too much, or are you generally quite good at maintaining a level of less is more?
Sometimes, if you're producing a record, and I always give myself a break between producing and mixing. So usually when I sit back down to mix it, it's kind of I'm sort of hearing stuff like kind of new again, and that's usually when I'm like, oh, mute that sucks. But like then also that's sometimes where I'm like, why didn't I add this thing to it? And then you end up adding more production. So that like Ithaca is actually a really good example of that. We did like a couple of there was a lot of keys and kind of post-production-y bits, but as I was mixing it, I added loads more as we were going along, and it's stuff that sometimes when you start hearing it come together, how the record is going to end up sounding, you're like, oh fuck, okay, this now I'm hearing it, this needs this and this needs this. So yeah, kind of depends really, but I've definitely been there where I've added too much and gone, what am I doing? I like to think I'm better at it now I'm a bit older and been doing it a little bit, but yeah, that's the thing actually I noticed when I mix something from newer producers, they do that whole throw everything at it, like and you get it a lot when people are adding, especially in the age now that you can add a million different synths and kind of post-production and stuff. People don't just choose one lead synth sound, they choose like fucking 20, and then you're sat there going like, what is the sound? Like I don't understand, is it that one, is it that? They're all totally different, but it's because people have the time and they have the technology to just to throw everything at it and then expect me to make it sound good.
There's a thing as well, I think, where like sometimes they talk about the Summer 4 slump with bands where the second album comes out and it's not the first album, and I always kind of like, I always feel it's maybe like a little bit unfair. I think in a lot of respects the second album was probably the one that is maybe more honest to what the band actually wants to sound like, and that first album is them trying to generate the buzz, the attention, it's the energy, it's that hunger, it's everything, and there can be that point of we do everything to get all eyes on us, and then the second album is right, well, we have a label now. We can kind of write something that we kind of wanted to write before. So that doesn't surprise me that, like, I suppose I never thought about it before, but it doesn't surprise me that people that maybe even from a recording or mixing point of view might be similar early on in their career, that they might try and do everything, like use all the techniques and everything in their arsenal, as opposed to the seasoned veteran, even 5 years on, being like that. Right, I'm a bit more comfortable now. I don't need to press all these buttons and move all these faders. I can, that's fine. So I suppose I never thought. I always kind of think about it from the artist perspective. I never really thought about it from the person behind the desk. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean that definitely happens. I remember like when I first started recording drums, I'd put up like a million different room mics everywhere and be like, I've got to try and use all of this. This is sick. And then now I'm like, stereo room at the front, stereo room at the back, in the right place, done. Don't need any more.
Obviously, like way back in the day, you worked on like one of the Funeral for a Friend albums a while back. Thinking back to that now, was that quite a kind of daunting experience to work with a band of that level at that point in your career, or were you kind of like fairly comfortable with it?
Yeah, it was daunting, and I think I learned quite a lot from doing that record. I think the thing is, like, Funeral were, when I was growing up, one of my favourite bands. I remember when Matt first phoned me about doing the record, he was in a hardcore band at the time, and I just assumed he was talking to me about recording his hardcore band.
Right, okay.
And I was like, so when do you want to, get the hardcore band in and do it? And he was like, no, man, it's Funeral for a Friend. And I was like, oh, why? But so that was obviously really exciting. But I think because, I mean, it was quite a long time ago now. They wanted to make like a punk record, basically. And I think that had I have done it now, I probably would have approached it with a bit more confidence and said, actually, we can make a punk record, but let's not veer too far away from what you guys are known for, and we should do it like this and do it like this. So it's an interesting one. I definitely feel like that was a very good learning curve for me, working with a band like that who have done however many records already. And I think that actually
do labels on bigger bands do labels get involved with bigger bands? Do you have more interaction from that point of view, where they're coming back, listening to what you've done and saying, this isn't really what we're looking for in terms of, or is that a myth? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of things out there where we're like that. As soon as they sign to X label, their sound completely changed because that label just wants to sell records. Is that a thing?
That's the thing.
Is that a fallacy?
Yeah, no, that's the thing.
Is it?
Yes.
I did wonder.
With stuff like major labels, I mean, you don't really get it from indie labels, but major labels, you definitely get sometimes A&Rs that are a bit pushy, or think they know how the band should sound because they signed another band that did quite well, and you should listen to everything they say. It's that kind of vibe sometimes. Most of the time I'm lucky I don't really get a lot of that because of the type of band I'm recording. A lot of the major label stuff, they're usually a bit more like hands off with it, and if it sounds good then it sounds good. But I've definitely been involved in projects in the past where stuff's ended up going to fucking 5 different mix engineers because the label weren't happy. And it's sometimes a bit of a shame because sometimes the band will have a vision of something and the vision just doesn't quite match up with what the label want, and the label think exactly they can sell more records if it sounds more polished. So they end up doing something that maybe isn't as vibey and isn't really as cool, and then isn't as special for it. But it does happen.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there any albums that you have done like the Funeral stuff that you would like to have another go at? Would you ever do that? Would you ever like take something you did years ago and remix it or remaster it?
I mean,
or you would just leave it the way it is?
There's definitely like a couple of records that I probably would like to have another go at, but I don't think I ever would, because that's sort of like a moment in time, isn't it, really? It's a moment in time for A, the band, B, me, where I was at in my career then, Especially with my production style, it's changed. There's stuff that stayed the same, but it has changed quite a lot over 10 years. So, I feel like if I did a record that I did maybe 8-9 years ago, it would be completely different to how I would approach it now. But that's just because I'm now mid-30s, and my life's different, and my experiences are different, and the way that I hear music is different. So I don't think I would ever probably go back and do any of that stuff, like a remix. Sometimes it has crossed my mind a couple of times where I've been like, maybe I should just remix that, but no, there's literally no point. Like, what's the point? I'll just do another record and make it sound better. Like,
it's a tricky one. There's a couple albums that I personally like the remix and remaster of. It doesn't happen very often, but there are a couple albums I mean, like, you know what, that was worth the remix, the remaster. But most of the time I'm usually like, you should have just left it the way it was. There's something about that original recording that you're just not going to capture again, doing a remix or remaster. But I mean, there's maybe one or two, possibly three.
Yeah.
That,
have you got any examples that you can think is like a one that's been remixed that's good?
My After the Burial, Rare Form, I loved it. I think they re-recorded that. I'm sure they changed, similar to one of the other albums that I would pick. I'm sure they changed from 7-string to 8-string or something like that. There was a change in guitar. I'm sure.
That's right.
The other one is Meshuggah and Nothing. I think the remix, the re-recording of that is just. It's a chef's kiss moment.
That's the classic one that everyone always says, isn't it? Like Nothing.
Yeah. There's also, even though I don't have the same issues that you have with it, was the Third Lamb of God album, which you for some reason have this like aversion to that I don't understand. The Devin Townsend produced one that Dave just did not like at all. Second Lamb of God, because we're technically
As the Palace is Born.
As the Palace is Born, which I think's alright. And I don't think the re-release is any better, to be honest. I think it's, comparably about the same. But you've a weird thing with that album, Dave.
I don't know what it is. Just Devin Townsend and me we just don't gel for some reason. I don't know what it is. I've just never really understood it. I don't know.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah,
it's a lot to take in. Yeah, it is, absolutely. I think it's just because I've always been surrounded by loads of people who just idolize him, and I've just never quite got it. I've tried every album that he releases. I'm like, I'm going to listen to that, give it another shot. Maybe I'm just missing something, and it just never. The
irony is that Lamb of God album is the least Devin Townsend production in the history of Devin Townsend productions. It doesn't sound like you could have told me anyone had done that, and I would have believed it. It doesn't have. It's not like layered up, and it's not like sonic assaults and booms and all the rest. It's if anything, it's a little bit more thin than the album that comes after, and the album that came before was so like intensely raw. That kind of worked, so it's a weird one. It's one of those weird anomalies. But then he did that 4-Stroke Barden album last year, and I fucking loved that. But I could tell 3 seconds into it, I was like, oh, Devin Townsend, they're either hugely influenced by or have worked with him, because it sounded like he was on the album. Still not convinced he didn't write it. So
weird. That happens a lot. Like Kurt Ballou's another one. Like usually when you hear a Kurt Ballou album, you're like, that's Kurt Ballou. Like you just know he's got a sound, and there's a character to his production that it just has. It's strange that, but it's cool though. I quite like that as well.
Yeah, I always kind of link like movies, and for some reason always movies and music together. But there are certain directors that. When Michael Mann springs to mind, I could pick out a Michael Mann movie anywhere, mostly because there's always this kind of long shots of neon streets and all the rest. And I'm like, oh, it's a Michael Mann movie. And it's the same way, I think there's certain producers that just have that, regardless what genre they turn their hand to, there's something about them, a little bit of their character embeds on it. And those are the best ones, the ones where you get that person's, not interpretation, but that person's feel on how the band should sound on that album, and as a result, it can certainly elevate bands for sure. Other times it doesn't always work out. It can go the other way. Like we mentioned before, you can have that dream partnership if you're like, oh, this band's working with this guy, this is going to be amazing, and then you listen to it and you're like, and then maybe it just there was something about the fit that never just gelled, or maybe it's forced, or there was a vision that they crafted together that I don't get. But yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know. Like, once again, it's like, if you obviously won't ever like say anything that you're not proud of. But is there anything that you've worked on where you genuinely thought at the start it was going to go a lot smoother than it did, and then when you got into it, it just became a bit of a logistical nightmare? Without mentioning names, obviously. Is that an experience?
Yeah, that's happened. Yeah, but I mean, like, it's sometimes just because you just don't gel with the people. Like, maybe you thought it was going to be, it could have been a great match, but like, actually, they're just not my kind of people, or for whatever reason, there's not a vibe or something, in which case you're always just going to be fighting that, I think. But yeah, I love being able to listen to a record like we were saying earlier, and like, Kurt Ballou, for instance, you can hear his records from a mile away. And I think the same with Rich Costey as well. Like, I love the stuff that Rich Costey does, and I love that Rich Costey can do a pop record and then do like Deftones or like someone like that, and he still brings his own thing to it. I think that's really awesome. And it still has integrity. That's the big thing for me, is integrity with him.
Yeah, for sure. There's a band from Chico, California, called Armed for Apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
Fairly kind of, do you know them? They're fairly kind of underground. They're not a huge name, a huge band, but we kind of got friendly with them years ago. We had done a different website. This was like back 2014, 12, 13, something like that, a long time ago. We reviewed a couple of their albums. They came over and they toured the UK. They supported 36 Crazy Fists. So we met up with them, we interviewed them and stuff. And just like everything about them, I loved the album, and live they were just so fucking good. And then I think the albums they released, I think it was Candlelight put one of them out, and then they released something with the guy from Unearth. He's got a label as well. He did something with them. And they haven't put anything out for a while, but then Nick, the drummer, he'd messaged to say they're going to God City, they're going to be recording with Kurt Ballou, and I was just like, I said to Duncan at the time, I was like, that is a pairing that is just like meant to be. Like, I just cannot wait to hear how that's going to end up. It's just, there's just certain bands that you're like, that they should be working with him. That should just be a thing. And those two should definitely be working together. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing that. But I think they're still looking for labels and stuff just now. But I think they've done the album. So definitely excited to hear that one.
Nice,
should be good. I think we're probably taking up enough of your time at this point. I've just looked at the clock there, over an hour. Thanks so much for coming on and just shooting the shit with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We can't wait to hear more stuff. The Ithaca album, we're really looking forward to hearing that. So that shouldn't be too far away. I think it's Hold Tight that are doing the PR for that, so they're pretty good with us. They usually try and send us stuff in decent kind of advance of the release. So I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Oh, nice.
And whatever else you've got planned for 2022, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of nice stuff coming out. So thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
I'll put links below to the thank you. We'll put links below to the ranch and stuff like that so people can check it out. If you're looking for production, mix and mastering and stuff, then check out the link below and have a little look and get in touch if you think your band should be using the ranch. So thanks very much appreciated. Hopefully catch you soon, and all the best. Thanks very much.
Sweet, nice one.